ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Marcus Whitney.
What's up, y'all? All right, bringing it home. All right, so whenever they do the bios, I feel like they steal a bunch of my thunder because I want to come up here and tell you who I am, but now you know who I am, so now what am I going to say? I guess I'll just start by saying Tennessee's been really, really good to me. I moved here almost 19 years ago from Atlanta, and I was starting a family at that time, and I was a kid who came from a great family, but found some troubles here and there and ended up dropping out of college and was just waiting tables and fell in love and started a family and didn't know what I was doing and moved here Labor Day of 2000 and who knew what was going to happen as a result of that. I started waiting tables at a couple of restaurants and very quickly started to meet people, and one of the people that I met was a member of the Frist family, the folks who started HCA. And I was teaching myself how to code in order to sort of get out of the waiting table game, and they said, hey, you're a smart guy, you should probably head down to Cummins Station and go see Bobby Frist, who's starting a company down there called HealthStream. And so I went down to Cummins Station, and there was a whole bunch of different innovative companies that were there. It was kind of the Silicon Valley of Nashville at that time. And I started going to these user group meetings and meeting all these people, and these kids are riding around in skateboards, and I was like, what the hell's going on? And I basically was fascinated with the idea that I could change my family's life, change my life, if I could just make it into one of these companies. And the day after my second son was born, I got a job at HealthStream, and basically my entire life changed from that point. I became a programmer at HealthStream. I stayed there for a year, and then went on to become one of the early employees, the fifth employee at a company called Emma Email Marketing. And it was a little company that was in the back of Centennial Park, right off of downtown Nashville. And we were working really hard. We almost ran out of money probably 3 or 4 times along the way. But we worked really hard and eventually got to the point where we built a company. And 4 years later, I learned about management and growing a team. And we went from 5 people to 50 people. And I remember bringing the first $1 million of revenue in. And Emma's gone on to be a great tech success in the city of Nashville, recently selling to a company called Campaign Monitor. I left in 2007 after going to South by Southwest, which is a big festival that happens every year in Austin, mostly known for music, but I went for the technology piece, and the year that I went was the year that Twitter launched. It was the year that social networking really started to blow, and it also was the year that Steve Jobs, that January, had announced the iPhone. And so that's kind of what I wanna talk about, but I'll catch you up to where I am today. So I was so inspired by that. I got my first Twitter account in 2007 at South by Southwest, came back, and I was like, I want to bring some of that energy back here to Nashville. Decided it was the right time for me to leave Emma. I went on and started a company. I created a bunch of different events around technology, was one of the people that co-launched the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, and eventually met my partner, Vic Gatto, and we started our firm, Jumpstart Foundry, which is a venture capital firm that invests in healthcare companies. So we've invested in about 80 companies over the last 5 years, and from all over the country, now looking at how to invest all over the world. And about 5 years ago, I also got involved with a fledgling group of folks who thought it was a good idea to bring soccer to the city of Nashville, and that just sort of caught fire, and now we have Nashville Soccer Club, and we'll start in Major League Soccer next year. So that's who I am. You all are people, and now you know who I am as a person. You already heard about my 2 kids that I love and sort of have done everything for. But along this journey, one thing has been really consistent, and it's been this connection between the evolution of the world via technology and how it's changing the work world. I can tell you, when I was the 5th employee at Emma, I stumbled into management. We grew, we needed another programmer, and so they were like, Marcus, you need to hire a programmer. Just 3 years ago, I was waiting tables. I had no training, no capabilities, no right to be managing anybody, but I had to go through the process of starting to grow a team. And so I went and I hired the first person. It was more like we were peers, and her name was Kim Hatcher, and she was a better programmer than I was, but I was there first, so I was senior to her. So there was a lot of learning there, and we eventually grew this great team and created this great culture. But one thing I can tell you is that there were no rules for what we were doing. There were absolutely no rules at all. And I left just as the smartphone launched. And then I started to be an entrepreneur where I was the CEO and I had all the responsibility of growing companies. And then there were really no rules. There were people who were starting to talk about, you gotta love your people, you gotta train them, you gotta do all this stuff, but there were also big changes that were coming in from technology. There was Glassdoor, there was this idea of the millennials, there was this idea of people moving around, no longer working anywhere 10 years, now working somewhere 4, 3, 2 years. And I tried a bunch of different stuff. And I guess what I can just tell you is, I never figured anything out. And I think the reason why I never figured anything out is because the smartphone isn't even a teenager yet, right? The smartphone isn't even a teenager yet. So how many people in here have a smartphone? Okay, great. How much time do you spend on your smartphone a day? Too much, right? Okay. When Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone, people think, okay, that's when the iPhone came out. And when you hear that, you think, okay, but there's Android, there's other smartphones, et cetera. It's not about the iPhone. Prior to August of 2017, I think that's when it came out, maybe June or July. Prior to the summer of 2007, when the iPhone came out, nobody had ever swiped or pinched on a phone, right? Nobody had ever swiped or pinched on a phone, and now it's all we do. Right? Now it's all we do. And it's only a 12-year-old. And so it has rewired all of us, and we don't have a narrative for it yet. We don't have a way to really describe what's happened to us, but we know we've been changed by it. Right? In this short amount of time, nobody had a Facebook account 10 years ago. Just kids at college had it. Nobody had it. Now we're putting them up in front of Congress to talk about how they're rigging elections, right? That's 10 years of change. The change has happened so fast that we don't have a good narrative for it. So I guess what I want to just bring up, and by the way, I said it's really important that we do have Q&A, because HR is not HR is not HR. HR is contextual, right? So I have experience in building teams in startups, technology companies, now a sports franchise for the first time. That's a very different thing. I've never built a team in the government. I've never worked in the government, so I don't quite understand the same challenges that you all have. I don't. So I'm not going to sit up here with some model, but I do want to challenge you. That it's going to be hard for you to find the answers to what you're looking for in a book today. I just want to throw that out there. Because I don't think anyone's figured this stuff out yet, right? And so the thing that should be exciting is that you get an opportunity to figure it out, as long as you don't come into it thinking you've got it figured out, right? Because you don't, because nobody's got it figured out. So let me just tell you a couple things that I've encountered along the way. We now have more information coming at us than we've ever had before. We don't have any analog to compare it to. There's nothing to compare it to. So none of us have ever really thought about what it means for anybody to be able to reach everybody at all times, and how much that changes the way that we evaluate the situation that we're in right now. Those of us haven't really thought about what that means. For you all as HR professionals, I would just say I think it's incredibly challenging. Incredibly challenging. How do you try to figure out how you're going to incentivize people, how you're going to build culture when you have no control over what they're consuming and what's going into their head on a nonstop basis, right? In healthcare right now, and that's the industry that I spend most of my time in healthcare right now, the entire healthcare industry has realized they have no solutions for what's really ailing society, which is behavioral health and the social determinants of health. They really don't know how to handle it. We really don't know how to drive people's behavior change. But Facebook knows how to change people's behavior, right? Netflix knows how to drive people's behavior. Amazon, Prime Day. How many else shopped on Prime Day? Amazon knows how to change your behavior, right? So we've got entities out there that have grown so big, so fast, and are so powerful that we we've just sort of accepted them because they provide this value into our life, right? The value that Facebook provides is awesome because now you're connected to high school friends that you haven't heard from in, as many years. Or now you can talk to grandma, grandpa whenever you want, right? Or now you can keep tabs on your kid, right? Or now you can share everything and feel like you don't actually have to pick up the phone and tell anybody anything because you just put it out there on the feed. All of these things are changing the way that we are engaging as humans. And the organizations that we work for are not immune from that, right? Then let's add in the allure and the appeal of what we see in the feed, right? People photoshopping pictures. I'm sure most of you have seen the Face app and the artificial intelligence and how that's changing the way that you can look just by pressing a button and it looks really realistic, right? Or some of the spoofed videos that are happening where they're taking somebody and putting someone else's face on it, right? All these things are just showing you how much we can easily be influenced by what is coming into this 12-year-old device that we now spend too much time with, right? And we're trying to use 30 and 40 and 50-year-old protocols for determining how we're going to engage people, how we're going to recruit people, how we're going to retain people, how we're going to incentivize people, what we expect from people, right? So what I would say is it's a brave new world. And for you all, right, because you're the ones who are dealing with people all the time. The other people in the organization, they're dealing with numbers, they're dealing with bits and bytes, they're dealing with customers, right? But you all are dealing with the engine of the organization, the actual people. I think you have an incredible amount of influence into how we're going to work in the future. An incredible amount of influence. I was part of a program called the Young American Leaders Program that started at Harvard Business School, and there have been several members of the Tennessee state government that have been a part of it. When I went through in the first year, Gabe Roberts, who was deputy counsel, I think he's, what does he now do at TennCare? Commissioner. Oh my gosh, really? Wow, good on you, Gabe. So Gabe and I went through that together. And the premise of that program was that Michael Porter, who basically wrote the book on competition and had been an advisor to numerous United States presidents, basically lost faith in Washington, D.C. and said, as a country, we're not going to be competitive if we try to do it in D.C. because that system has been hacked and we're not at our best as a country out of D.C. So we need to start looking to cities. We need to start looking to cities. And so they assembled 10 cities, at least in the first year that I was doing it, and 2 of those cities were from Tennessee, Nashville and Chattanooga, were 2 of the cities that they assembled 10 leaders from each city to go and spend a week at Harvard Business School to review different case studies. And Mitch Weiss, who's one of the professors there, was running us through basically this entire school of thought called public entrepreneurship. How many of you have heard of public entrepreneurship? Okay, so it's basically the idea that government can and really needs to become entrepreneurial. Can and needs to become entrepreneurial. And there's a challenge there because historically and traditionally, you don't have any competition. It's not like the free market, right? Where there's a sense of urgency that if you don't become entrepreneurial and you don't innovate, that you're going to get eaten up by the competition, right? There's a sense of, I have a government job, it's pretty stable. But the reality is we are competing. We're now competing on the global stage, right? We're competing with other states, we're competing on the global stage. There's always a competition at play. And the forcing factors of change that are happening from a technology perspective, from globalization, and from the economy mean no one is exempt. I could just list the different places where you all are going to feel it. You're going to feel it on fight for talent, right? People have options. You want the best people. I want you to have the best people, right? I live here. I want you to have the best people. But the best people have options, and they're looking at those options every single day, and those options are getting pushed to them every single day on their phones, right? So how are you competitive? How are you framing it up for them? How are you positioning it to them that this is going to be an incredible 2 years, not 10, on their journey as they develop their career? What is that going to look like, right? So, and also the problems that you have to solve. You're not going to get more resources, but your problems are going to keep mounting because the expectations are going to continue to grow because just because you're government, you don't get a pass. Millennials are going to expect every single thing, not going to, they do. They expect every single thing to happen on their phone, on demand. And most of it, they want it to like read their mind. Like some of us are mad because we feel like Alexa's listening to us. But like there's a whole generation that wants Alexa to listen to them. Because they don't have to think about it. They just want it to like predict and deliver, right? So they can focus on the creative thing that they need to do. And so I think the stability of organizations has to be considered to be under attack and as a threat. And you all have the opportunity, to do something pretty legendary. And I think the timing is like really, really important right now. Before the smartphone becomes a teenager, which will be next year. It'll be 13 years old next year. Before the smartphone becomes a teenager, you get the chance to really think about what the heck does this thing mean for the future of this state? What does it mean for the future of work? Jason told me that people are starting to work remotely, right? I couldn't even imagine that a government employee would ever work remotely. But I guess you're being forced to consider how to do it. And I think there's multiple reasons why, right? There's probably you need to do it for talent purposes, and you probably also have to do it for budget constraints, right? Am I right? Okay, so more and more things that I've been dealing with for the last 7 to 10 years are going to come into your world. More and more things are going to come into your world. And the question is, how are you going to embrace that? How are you going to embrace that? And how are you going to see it as an opportunity as opposed to something that's creating friction because it's forcing you to change the way that you've been operating and what you've been thinking, right? So with that, I'll keep talking, but I also do want to say I really do want to open this up as a conversation, and I want to field questions because I don't know what you're dealing with every single day. When this will get really interesting is when we start talking about your specific experiences and what you're seeing out there in the field. And we start having a conversation about what I'm seeing in my world and how I might be able to give you a lens into what you're going to experience, or at least give you some feedback on how you might want to think about it. So, how many of you feel like you have the opportunity to be entrepreneurial in your jobs? Awesome opportunity, Commissioner. Awesome opportunity. So, can I take creative license real quick? Okay, I got the Commissioner's permission. You all can be entrepreneurial. You absolutely can be. In fact, you kind of have to be. Now, let me not scare you about what I mean when I say that. Here's what I mean. I mean, you can identify problems, and as opposed to just sit there and look at them, complain about them, take them home, you can think creatively about how to solve those problems. You can think out of the box about how to solve those problems. And my guess is that that is what leadership wants you to do. My guess is that that's exactly why they're doing this whole event, right? They're bringing in people and they're giving you books and they're giving you training and they're giving you credits, but what they really want to do is turn you on. And they want to get the best out of you. They want to get the most out of you. And the only way that happens is if you have license to be creative in your role. That's the only way. You're not a cog, right? You're a person. You see things. You're smart. You can evaluate. You've got potential. You've got willpower. You got to turn all that stuff on, right? It actually kind of hurt my heart to see so few hands go up because I'm counting on you. I want to live here for the rest of my life. And I know that the future of this state largely depends on the quality of the people that we bring in. And I know you all have to be entrepreneurial for us to get the best people and to engage them and to get the most out of them. You all have to be entrepreneurial. I know that. So, sorry if I'm challenging you. Everyone's really quiet right now. You're all okay? Are y'all okay? Give me some feedback. Are y'all all right? Okay. All right. I don't want to lose you. But I am here to challenge and to encourage and to empower, right? I just think it's so important for you to know that you have license, you have agency. And look, it's no different from what I experience. Yes, I'm in the startup world, I'm in the entrepreneurial world, but that doesn't mean people my entire life haven't been telling me, no, I can't do something, right? And in some cases, they were right, but what they really were saying was I can't do it that particular way. They didn't mean I couldn't do it. They just meant that particular route wasn't going to work. So I'd have to think creatively about how to get the same thing done. You know, never having a plan B, but having multiple routes to the goal of plan A, if that makes sense. So with that, I will keep talking, but I would love for the first brave person to engage in a conversation, because this can get really, really good. And my guess is you're going to learn a lot more from each other than you're going to learn from me standing up here. And this is your last moment of this awesome 2-day event that you have to share what you're thinking and learn from each other, okay? So I want to start by giving you license right now that you can stand up and you can ask a question, or you can make a statement, or you can call bull on anything that I just said. But this is part of it, right? It's a practice. You got to work the muscle of your agency. You can't just think it. You got to actually do it. So does anyone want to step up and start the conversation? Yes. We have microphones, so hold on one second. Hold on, just 1 second. I want everyone to hear you. Here we go.
You said you were disheartened that so few hands rose during the
yes.
entrepreneurial question. How would you best encourage us, who are largely bound by red tape and approvals from the executive team, to think entrepreneurially?
Yes. So I would encourage you to see it as a game. Okay? To see it as a game. So so the reason why I couldn't do anything else for a living is because I play for work every day. And the world doesn't tell me I can do what I want to do, right? Like trust me when I tell you, there was absolutely nothing in the world that told me I could be a co-owner of a professional sports team. As an example, right? But it was a game, it was fun. It's like, okay, well, let's see how I might be able to do that, right? A really good, so let me give you a specific trick. How might I, right? That's a phrase you can use. You're thinking, here's the problem, here's the vision I have for it being solved. You're not talking about like how you're gonna solve it, but current state, ideal state, how might I, right? And then you get to engage in the fun part, which is the creative process of trying to think through all the ways that you can duck and dodge and hurdle over and, do the caterpillar under the red tape, right? I promise you there's a way. I promise you there's a way. And the way might even be influencing somebody. And that could take 6 months, right? Totally, could take 6 months. But that's the game. That's the game. Does that make sense?
So you're encouraging us to do an entrepreneurial mindset in government. In your experience, what is the most innovative or entrepreneurial thing you've seen in the government sector?
Okay, that's a great question. So I believe that I believe all real momentum stems from leadership. Now, every single individual has more leadership authority than they think they do, right? But ultimately, when you have a leader who steps in and is by default innovative, and makes innovation like a top priority, a top strategic priority, then everything from there sort of follows. So I'll give you something that is that's pretty top of mind for me because I'm in the healthcare space. So a pretty interesting thing happened in Austin, Texas. I think it's Travis County, where the government there was able to, in a state where Texas and Tennessee are very, very similar in terms of their aversion to taxes, Very, very similar, right? So the idea that you would ever raise taxes is like totally unheard of. But what they did was they painted a picture of a future where the healthcare of the city would be much, much cheaper and much more effective. And they were able to get a pretty significant property tax increase done to do a handful of things. So the first thing they did was they then went to the State Board of Regents and they got a brand new medical school created at UT Austin. Now, I don't know how much you know about medical schools. There are really no new medical schools. There hasn't been a new medical school in decades, okay? So to create a new medical school is like crazy. So they got that done. So now the Dell Foundation has UT Austin School of Medicine. It's backed by Dell, and it was approved. Then they took that property tax increase, they redid the county hospital, and they created this medical school to basically teach what the future state of medicine is going to look like. So if you go to Dell Medical School, you're not going there to get hired by Old School Hospital. You're going to learn what the future of healthcare is going to look like. They have an IDEO-like organization called the Design Institute of Health embedded in there, and they basically are, and they created their own insurance company that now pays for the care. And so they've got this new method of how they're going to care for people, this brand new hospital that they've built, and this new insurance company that are all sort of aligned to make sure that Austin can basically live out the future of healthcare. That started as a government initiative, right? It's now moved into academia and it's moved into the for-profit world, but it started as that. And when I look at the future of healthcare in this country, Austin it's really hard to point to any place else that's a city of scale. They're the fastest growing city in the country. It's really hard to point to any place else that's a city of scale where I really think they have a chance to rewrite the rules for how they take care specifically of the indigent, right? So what I would say to you is, and we learned this when we were at Harvard Business School, learning about public entrepreneurship, is you can just Google public entrepreneurship, and there's case study after case study after case study of governments and leaders, right, who have explicitly given that charge to their team. But I also believe it can happen from the bottom up too, right? And I also think it doesn't have to be grandiose things like that. I only gave you a big example because you asked for one. I think it can be small things. I think it can be, just the way that you operate meetings on a week-to-week basis. You can innovate that. You can just little things that can make things more efficient, make people happier, make people more effective. Just little things, right? But that's an example of something that I think in 10 years, the rest of the country is going to look at this city and say they're doing it different than everybody else. And it all started with a very improbable property tax raise. So that's an example. Another question.
Can you speak to the tension between being entrepreneurial and seeing ideas to fruition so that the people on your team aren't running after the next bright, shiny object?
Yes. So it depends on how you interpret the word entrepreneurial, okay? In my head, there is no dissonance between the two things you just said, right? A great entrepreneur, it's her job to see the vision through, right? And only pull the plug on it when it's clear it's not going to work, right? But many, many, many things look dead before they take off. Most things, most incredible things that change the world look like they're going to get killed before they totally take off, right? The story of going to the moon. So, because we are revisionist historians, generally speaking, and I didn't live during this era, but I love entrepreneurship, so I love to kind of study, and I also know how people like to revise history and say they were supporting you the whole time when they were actually doubting you the whole time. If you study the story of like going to the moon, forget the JFK moonshot piece, there was huge blowback about the idea that you could even do it from a scientific perspective. So like the New York Times wrote this whole massive article lambasting the science of it, saying rockets are what's being designed is basically against the laws of physics. Completely against the laws of physics. And so it was written off by the general population and also by the scientific community until it happened, right? So most incredible things will get killed if you let other people kill them. But you have to see them through. So I guess the only thing I would really say is I would maybe adjust what you mean when you say entrepreneurial, right? And I get it. I think a lot of people look at entrepreneurship and say, oh, it's people who just want to do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. And I would say being an entrepreneur is really, really tough, because once you get your eye on something and you know that it's for the best and you can build your little team around you to make it work, the only thing that actually makes it happen is your heart. That's the only thing. Because on the road from where you are right now to that happening, you're going to get nonstop doubt, even internal. You'll get imposter syndrome. There's a million sort of things like that. And so it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to bring new things into the world. You know, one of the reasons why people don't do it is because it's very safe to never try to do anything. You know, part of what I'm asking you to do is to get on the stage and be vulnerable. And the reason why I asked Commissioner Williams to give me the authority to say it is because you got to know it's okay to fail, right? It's okay. Right? You can't innovate and you can't be entrepreneurial if you're constantly scared to death of failure. But you can't do anything cool either, right? You can't do anything cool either. So it's not just about coming in, clocking in, doing what's asked of you. It's about creating a legacy for yourself. And I think what I'm just trying to say as I'm trying to set up for you is, I don't know how many government HR teams are really, really thinking through what the future of work looks like and the power they have to really sort of write the rules for the next industrial revolution for the very first time. But that's what's going on. That's exactly where you are. Let me just be 100% clear. That's where you are. We've never had AI. We're 12 years into smartphones. This whole world that we have right now. I actually went on the iPhone App Store to look before I got here to look at State of Tennessee apps that we have today, and there's like 6 apps. I think the average rating score on them is like 2 stars, right? So as a state, we haven't even yet really gotten on the phone, right? In terms of the way that we engage the citizens that we serve. And that's okay. I'm not knocking anybody because this is hard stuff. But like, I needed to do a little bit of research. I didn't want to come up here and say, oh, you know, or assume anything. You guys aren't on the phone, but no, you are on the phone. You got 6 apps. You know, I think the highest rated one and the one that looked the best that I saw was the one for state parks. That one looked really good. You know, but a lot of the things that you would use to facilitate your relationship with the government, you know, the things that you absolutely need, it's kind of janky. You know? It is. You know? I don't expect it to stay that way, Governor Lee. But that's the current state of things. So I guess I'm just saying, like, no one's immune. No one's exempt. You know, 3 weeks ago, I stood in front of about 1,000 healthcare executives, and I basically told them the same thing. You're not exempt. You don't get a pass. Like, no one's safe. Everything's changing. You don't get to put your head in the sand, right? So you might as well step up, be counted, be present, and do something cool. You might as well do something cool, you know? And you can, and what's really cool is you all can do it together. You know, that's why I'm talking to all of you together, because you can do it together. You don't have to do it on your own little island. You know, you can form groups and support each other. By the way, that's another thing that entrepreneurs do that I don't think a lot of people know. But like, we have support groups, because it can get really lonely right? Out here trying to make the world a better place by yourself. So we get together and we support each other. We share stories about what the other person is going through, and oh, well, this is what I did here, and this is how this helped me. You know, we've moved things forward to a point where there's a lot of systems and structure and process to entrepreneurship now. It's a lot more disciplined than I think people who have never touched it think it is. And you can look to that world for models today, right? You can look to that world for models today. You don't have to start from scratch. There's tons of systems and books and stuff in place that you can engage with, but you got to take the step, and you got to have that conversation with your your direct reports and your superiors, and start to say, hey, I think we should look at how we can make things better consistently, continuously. How can we continuously make things better? Continually be more efficient and more effective with our budget that we have. Continually make the experience that people are going to have here better. How many people have heard of the concept of the tour of duty from LinkedIn? Okay, so this is an innovation that, and Kelly, I know you heard of it, so you didn't say anything, but I know you heard of it, because you just told me you did. But let me just tell you about the LinkedIn tour of duty concept. So everyone knows what LinkedIn is. So Reid Hoffman is co-founder of LinkedIn, and he was experiencing the same challenges that everyone else experiences in the hiring and the retention of employees. And his whole business is about hiring people. And in fact, he's enabling people to move from place to place very quickly, right? They don't need to have a resume anymore. They can just sort of have their LinkedIn profile, et cetera. And then think about it, like he's doing it in Silicon Valley where you can't outpay. You know what I mean? Like it's so hard. The talent wars that are going on there are like impossible. And so he took a step back and he kind of said, okay, this is happening. I'm not going to be able to stop it from happening. Quite frankly, I'm enabling it to happen. So what does this mean for the future of work? And he came up with this concept of tour of duty. And it's just a narrative. It's just a narrative. It's not anything else. It's not a process. It's not a system. It's just a narrative. And here's the narrative. The narrative is people are, generally speaking, not going to stay anywhere 10 years anymore. Start there. They're probably just not going to do it. Why? There's a million reasons why. We don't need to sit and navel gaze about the why, right? But we just know it's happening. It's definitively true now. So how do we design an HR experience around that new truth? And so they came up with this idea of a tour of duty. And so on the front end of the engagement, here's what they say. There's a certain type of tour of duty called a transformational tour of duty. And what they say is, okay, welcome to LinkedIn. You're on this tour of duty with us. It's going to take 2 to 3 years because you can't do anything meaningful or transformational in less than that amount of time. So it's going to be 2 to 3 years. And you're going to take on this project. And yes, you have a title and a role and responsibilities and compensation and a team that you work with and persons that you report to and maybe people who report to you. But ultimately, this is your mission. This is your mission while you're here. And if you are successful in this mission, you will transform our company and your career will be transformed. Okay? And at the end of that process, let's sit down and let's talk. And if you want to, if you want to move on, we'll help you. We'll help you find the next place to be, right? Instead of making it this super awkward thing where it's like you can't ever talk to your superior about the next thing you want to do in your career, so you got to hide it, and then you surprise them, and then they weren't prepared, and then they're mad about it. It's like just design it in. Just design it in. By the way, I'm not telling you got to do this. I'm just informing you about how the LinkedIn tour of duty works. And it completely changes the dynamic because now everything is discussed. I've never said I'm going to fire you at the end of 3 years. I've just said I understand that at the end of 3 years, our company and our organization will be significantly changed because of the work you've done. You will be significantly changed because you had never done this before in your career, and now you have this experience and this work under under your belt. And if the next opportunity that you want makes sense with something else that we have, awesome. Let's sign up for another one, right? Or you did this and now it's setting you up to be great for this next thing, and we would love to help with that process. Like, just think about the goodwill that's built into a much more honest conversation about the reality of the change in how long people are working places. So it's a narrative. It's just a narrative, right? And then you take the fear out of it. You take the everyday, oh, am I going to lose somebody? You know what I mean? Because now, when they're ready to go, how much more likely are they to come and talk to you about it? Right? So there's an example of an innovation happening in HR, coming from Silicon Valley, that I didn't see any hands up here for. It's out there, y'all. It's out there. There's so much good stuff out there, right? That you could just literally pull it off the shelf and put it in practice and move something that you've been stuck on forward considerably. Am I out of questions? No, I'm not. Awesome. It's better with the mic. It's better with the mic.
Okay, Marcus, so you have been speaking with healthcare executives.
Yes.
I'm going to challenge you to go back to them and to be more entrepreneurial by getting out of the boardrooms and getting in the operating rooms and getting in the waiting rooms, listening to the providers and the patients. Now, I want to challenge my coworkers here in the room to know that the way we can be more operational is providing solutions and ideas and opinions to the people sitting in the boardrooms of all of our departments. Because we're the providers and or the customers of each other and our citizens, and we know and hear and see operationally what might possibly work and should be considered.
%1,000%. And I give it to the healthcare executives. So you're preaching, sister. I totally give it to them all the time. You know, I don't think I'm saying anything all that great, to be completely honest with you. I think everyone kind of knows, but the way that we're wired is we're wired that one of the most important things for us is to fit in, is a sense of community. And it just so happens that we're not yet at a point. Now, if you lived in Silicon Valley, everybody would be talking like this, and so you would fit in if you were talking like this. But in most of America, that's not the case, right? That's not the case. And so we would rather bite our tongue and fit in than, and this is not a judgment statement, this is like how we're wired as humans. This is how we're wired as humans. We would rather bite our tongue and fit in than be right, bold, courageous, and honest and stand out, right? And so that's why we kind of need to do it together, right? Because I don't believe many people are gonna stand out because the risks are pretty significant and it's pretty scary, you know? But if we did it together, it wouldn't feel so scary, right? Yes.
You know, I think a lot of us were sort of shy of the word innovate or entrepreneur, I'm sorry, because it's not a word that we usually use in our bubble.
Yeah.
But we do use the word innovate.
Yeah.
And I think that if we had sort of had the mindset of the word innovate, you would have seen so many more hands.
Okay.
Because I know this room is full of people who have ideas and want to make changes and bring solutions.
So
I think we were just not thinking with the same word.
yes. So I hear you, and here's what I want to say about those two words. words have cultural context, right? They're like loaded from a cultural perspective. And so I explicitly used the word entrepreneurial as opposed to innovate because innovate, while pretty appropriate, also has kind of lost its bite, right? It's kind of lost its bite, whereas entrepreneurship is still pretty scary. Still pretty scary. It's still pretty much associated with risk. And I'm not just talking about innovation, I'm talking about risk-taking. A lot of what I'm talking about is about risk-taking and getting past the fear of making a mistake or failing and how others are going to view that, right? There's a cultural shift that has to happen in any organization to make it safe for people to make mistakes and to fail, as long as the intent and the effort were right. Does that make sense? So I agree with you and I hear you, and I want to dial it up just a notch, if that's okay. I want to dial it up just a notch and say, let's get a little more into the uncomfortable zone than innovate, because innovate's been, unfortunately, culturally watered down. You know, what ended up happening was a lot of executives and leaders found that they could use the word innovate as a scapegoat for not doing the real work, right? So they would point to what we would call in the entrepreneurial world incremental innovations, right, as opposed to disruptive innovations. And they would point to those and say, see, we're innovative. But like they're not really changing anything. I mean, you know, they take this thing and they move it over here. Innovate. So you follow what I'm saying? As opposed to saying, how can I rethink this entire thing, right? So when I say entrepreneur, I want you to have a vision in your head of Sarah Blakely. You know, I want you to have a vision in your head of Steve Jobs. I want you to have a vision in your head of Jeff Bezos. I want you to have a vision in your head of people who saw something and said, but what happened if I turned it completely this way? And I don't have all the answers about what happens then, right? But I'm just wondering, because we've been doing it this way for this long, knowing exactly what the result is going to be, and no one seems to be all that thrilled about it, right? So might I be the one to approach that and really turn it on its head? And the important thing to understand is the world is doing that right now. The world is doing that. So where things really get scary for any organization is inside of the four walls. You can just keep telling that same narrative. You can keep telling that same narrative. And then you go home, and then you're focused on the family, and then that's it. You go to work, you go home. You go to work, you go home. You hang out with the people, confirmation bias sets in, and you're completely ignoring what's happening in the greater world. Here's what's happening in the greater world. Sears is gone. Bye-bye. Right? That's what's happening in the greater world. Organizations that never thought it could happen to them, it's happened to them, right? We have new conglomerates. Amazon is a conglomerate. They're getting into any industry they want. They're coming to healthcare. So that's the thing. When I talk to the healthcare executives, I mean, the thing, I tell them, I'm like, look, you can do it or not do it, but Amazon's going to do it. And Amazon's going to contract with the government for it, by the way. They're going to start getting Medicare dollars. That's definitely happening. Definitely happening. They already contract with the government. I don't know what people think. Amazon Web Services already contracts with the government. They're not just out here selling us soap, right? They're selling everything. They are the everything store. Nothing is off limits. Nothing can't be privatized. Nothing can't be renegotiated. Nothing can't be rethought through. So I never like to lead with fear, but there is an element to this that's like, there's an imperative here. I never like to lead with fear because I want to inspire people, but you also have to understand what's at stake if you don't do anything. So I'll just say that. It's coming whether you want to do something about it or not. And here's who's safe, absolutely 0 people. Yes?
How do you see the entrance of Amazon into Nashville and other large tech companies coming into Nashville affecting the state's ability to recruit and keep strong IT personnel?
Can I ask you, how do you see it?
Kind of expensive.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say so, right? We're all in a talent war, okay? And at the same time, we're also facing the inevitable automation of everything. Everything. My son just got into UTK. He's going for computer engineering. I'm so glad it's computer engineering and not computer science. I grew my career on writing software, and I've already told him I think the computers are going to code themselves. I'm glad he's doing computer engineering because that means he can do hardware. Because that's less likely in his lifetime, but not impossible. We're never going to stop automating or handing things off to the computers. Let me just be, this is totally unpopular, and I have to say it. We're never going to stop. We're going to keep giving stuff to the computers. Okay? That's going to keep happening. So, what do I think Amazon's going to do when the average job that they have is going to be $150K and they're starting with 5,000? I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be tough for everybody. You know, and it's not just that. Then they're giving stock. I got a friend who just got hired by them. I know his package. He's like a millionaire now from being hired. Forget the salary, the stock. The stock, right? So yeah, it's about to be new competition running around here, for sure. Yes.
So I'm an executive assistant.
Yes.
And this is a totally different, I mean, when you're talking about taking risk and you're talking about having fun with innovating or with and the entrepreneurial spirit, like how do I cultivate that entrepreneurial mindset?
Yes.
And yeah, how do you
Okay,
do it?
awesome. Thank you for asking. That's such a great question. So I have an executive assistant. I wish she would be looking for all my problems and just figuring them out and like making everything in my life 1,000% better than it already is. I really wish she was not just doing the things I asked her to do. She's been with me long enough to know who I am and what I'm trying to do, and I kind of have to ask for everything. Like, she could run Marcus Whitney, Inc. She could be the CEO of it. I would love for her to do that. That'd be awesome. Just do it. Like, do you think you're going to get fired for that?
No, I don't know, Doc.
No,
Can we talk?
look. Okay. So look. Here's the deal. Here's the deal. There's like no unemployment. Everyone's got options. If it doesn't work, leave.
Oh boy.
I'm just telling the truth. If it does, I'm sorry, I love you and I know it'll work. That's why I said it. But if it doesn't, look, this is the thing, right? Whatever it is you're afraid of, play it out. What's the worst that can really happen? What's the worst that can really happen? Play it all the way out. And then, if that happened, what would you do? What would you do? In most cases, you have options. You have more options. You have more options than you give yourself credit for, right? Everyone does. Like, that's the punchline here. Everyone is where they are because they want to be. Now, they're working on the narrative that's in their head. So if they say, I have to be here or I'm screwed, then, and so it is, okay? And so it is. I'm not gonna argue with you about you and your life and what you think about you and your life. I'm not gonna argue with you. I might know differently, but it's your life. And whatever you think is the truth about you. But if I was in the same situation as you, I'd have different options. I had different options. I have less credentials than everyone in this room. I shouldn't even be up here. You have more options than you think you do. You have more options. I'm just not afraid. You know what I'm saying? I'm just not afraid. And by the way, I'm not saying don't offer the courtesy of saying to the person who you're the executive assistant for, hey, I've noticed that these things might be sort of getting on your nerves, and I'd love to like take that on as a project and come up with a way to like make this 1,000% better for you. You know, that's just called basic respect and communication, right? So like, guess what? Being an entrepreneur doesn't make you exempt from that. You still have to learn how to effectively communicate with people, so I'm not telling you to bypass that. But I am saying, why wouldn't you try? Why wouldn't you try? There are definitely stories of executive assistants who have moved up to be the CEO of a company. You know that, right? Okay. I just want to make sure people understand like there is no one path. And because you have a certain title, that doesn't mean that's where you're going to be for the rest of your life. I literally think I'm just getting started. Like I literally think I'm just getting started. Okay. So the reason why everyone, not everyone here, but like everyone, the greater everyone. The reason why everyone doesn't do everything that they could do is because they're stuck, like they have like well-being challenges. Everyone does, by the way. Everyone has well-being challenges. And I literally think I'm just getting started because I finally in my life at 43 years old, just having, put a 20-year-old and now an 18-year-old into the world and having gotten these things on my resume that I'm past the point of the general level of insecurity that most people have, and now I can get to the real stuff, like the stuff that came from childhood. You know what I'm saying? That really holds me back from being as great as I can possibly be. And so much of this is about working on yourself, right? People spend a lot of time talking about their outer situations. Oh, I'm glad I just talked through this. So this is not just about companies, because I actually don't buy the whole thing about like, you gotta like totally love your people and blah, blah, blah. Like I think that's true, but I think what's underlying that whole narrative is this false idea that somehow your job makes you happy. It's ridiculous. Nothing outside of you makes you happy. You make you happy. The inside. If your inside is not right, you can go anywhere. You can hop from job to job to job and you'll still be there, unhappy as ever. It'll be happy for a minute, but then it'll go away. The dopamine rush goes away, right? So that's another issue, and that's a reality. And when you see somebody who's like that, you don't need to judge them. You just need to know, oh, this person, that they're still developing, or they're still going through some insecurities, some trauma, or some whatever, right? I mean, I can talk about this because we're HR professionals in this room, so y'all can, like, I know you get what I'm saying. It's really pretty deep, the reason why people don't act on all their options, or the reason why people don't step into their braveness, you know what I'm saying? Step into who they really are. It's really about narratives in their head that somebody else put there. It's not their truth. You know what I'm saying? So like, that's what's really behind all this stuff. The technology is gonna force us to face this, because it's gonna put so much pressure on existing conventions that we're not gonna have anywhere to run. We're just gonna be looking at the Black Mirror like it's just us. It's just me, it's just me. Does that make sense? Cool. I think I got time for like one or two more. Y'all weren't expecting that last part. Commissioner, you got anything? At Harvard Business School, they cold call. So like, if nobody says anything, they'll like cold call on somebody. So I was like, let me cold call. Yeah, okay. Yes, I definitely want to do this, okay.
So
I had a question about communication.
Yes.
Do you think there's a difference in the communication expectations between the generations? And if so, what do you think can be done practically or entrepreneurially to kind of bridge that gap?
1,000% there is. And the most important thing we can do is stop referring to the generations and just talk to the individual. It's the number one thing, right? It's the number one thing. Just talk to the person and be an active listener and just listen and get to know and understand that person and get them to the point where they feel like you can connect with them. Now, is there a difference in the generations? Of course, there's always been difference in generations. We have different reference points. We have different social understandings of how the world works. No question. But the internet has removed the buckets. Now we can all be individuals. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. We all have a profile. I get to be me, right? A lot of millennials I talk to don't really want to be millennials. They just want to be them, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So I shared with the team here yesterday about my vision of the state of Tennessee being the best place to work in the Southeast. I liken the state of Tennessee as a conglomerate. We do it all. If you think about any type of job, you can get it at the state of Tennessee. I view our competitor as Amazon, as you just said. What, in your opinion, that's out there, how can we leverage that brand I just described? I would also add on the brand is that we're here to serve, and that's a different. How can we leverage that brand to compete with the Amazons, in your opinion?
So I think, first of all, I think that's an amazing way to frame up what the state of Tennessee is as a conglomerate where you can, any opportunity you want, you can get within it. I love that. I had never really thought about it that way, but when you said it, I was like, yeah, of course it is. That's absolutely right. I think, and because you asked the question, I'll answer you. I think leaders have to come up with the narrative, and they got to say it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, because people don't believe the leaders because of what has happened over so many years, right? It's like we know now from a brain science, and I'm blinking, but I'm gonna finish this. We know now that it takes like 10 positive affirmations to overcome one negative, interaction. We know that. These are just the way we're wired because we're fight or flight animals, right? And so if you add up all of the negative interactions that happened before you ever came on board, you could spend your entire time as commissioner where your only legacy is getting people to really believe the narrative. That might be, when your term is done, that might be it, right? Because it's such a big challenge, right? But narrative is everything. You cannot get people to move without narrative because that's what we are. It's what we are. We're a living story. We don't remember data points. We remember stories. We feel stories. We can relay stories. We can tell stories to other people, right? And so I think you're in a circle, and then that circle, and then that circle, and then that circle, and then that circle. Everybody has got to be every single day telling this story. And one day, it'll just be the story of your lives. It'll just be the way that you live. And you won't have to say it anymore because it'll be who you are, right? Anything else, Dr. Holloway? Thank you. I appreciate your time.